Welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast. Each week you'll find inspirational, motivational interviews with some of the world's best language learners, industry experts, all trying to help you to learn foreign languages better, faster, and more efficiently. And here we go. This episode is brought to you by italki, the world's best tutoring platform. So if you've been struggling to find a tutor online, or if you just want to enhance your language learning, I highly recommend checking out italki. You can get a $10 free credit after purchasing your first lesson on italki by going to actualfluency.com/italki. That's ITALKI. On the show today, I've got Michele from the Intrepid Guide. Michele is an Australian travel blogger who now lives in London, UK. And we're talking today about how you can enhance your travels, both with or without languages. I mean, there are lots of tips and tricks in this episode that Michele is sharing on how you can just, in general, have better experiences. And the reason that I bring on a travel blogger, I mean, she does write about languages as well, as we'll get into in the episode. But the reason I do that is because I think traveling and language learning are invariably linked. So if you're just going to learn language to sit in your basement and, not really use it, that's fine. That's to each their own. But I think that most of the people who want to learn languages want to actually use it for traveling. And sometimes you'll be surprised how far you can take just a few sentences or just a little phrase book collection of words and phrases to actually get a much better experience, or maybe you get discounts or special treatment. But I hope you enjoy this episode with Michele, and I'll see you in the next one. What is the Intrepid Guide, and what gave you the idea to start it?
Oh, the Intrepid Guide. Well, the reason why I started it was sort of, I don't know, just a passing comment that my auntie had made to me. She left a comment on my Facebook post a few years ago, because I religiously just posted photos and like interesting facts about the places that I was visiting. I think I'm like the only one out of my family it's quite a big family that has sort of traveled as much as I have. There's no one else in the family that had done that. And so a lot of my relatives and cousins, and they just sort of follow me on Facebook. And one particular auntie was like, "Oh, you should do something with all this stuff." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I don't know, write a book." Like, she didn't know. She's just like, but she was just so entertained and inspired, and she just loved, seeing all these photos of the places that I was visiting and the stuff that I was learning along the way. And I thought, oh, maybe there's something to this, but I didn't know what the answer was. So it was at least a year later that a colleague at work had sort of, as a passing comment again, he said to someone else, "Oh, you should just start a blog." And I wasn't part of the conversation, but I overheard it. And I turned around and I said, "What? What are you talking about?" It's like, "Yeah, start a blog and then you can make your income that way." And I'm like, "What? How does that even work?" And this was, 3.5 years ago. So, yeah, long story short, it didn't take me very long to decide, I'm going to give this a go, because maybe I could switch, because I was sort of at that point where, I've been doing web design since I left university, and I still enjoy it, but I feel like I'm ready for a career change, and maybe this could be it. He coached me a little bit. He's like, get a WordPress blog website, set it up, just get like the cheapest hosting, so it's like minimal that you don't have to invest in it, that you don't really need much to get started. And he's like, and then just start writing, I'm like, oh, okay. So he's like, I'm not going to overwhelm you with all the particulars, but just get started. That's the hardest part. Come up with a name, create a logo, and then just start writing about stuff. And then he ended up leaving and retiring on whatever he was doing. He wouldn't really share too much. But yeah, he sort of created his own online business, and he was now retiring because of it. And he moved to the south of Spain to, live off the fruits of all that labor. So I thought, right, well, he is proof that I could turn this into something similar. I could, change my lifestyle, and there's something to it. So he left, and then I was just left on my own because we sort of lost contact. But I just started reading into it, started researching. And the name, The Intrepid Guide, was something that was spawned from the fact that my family and friends thought I was so fearless and adventurous, for moving abroad in the first place. So that's the meaning of Intrepid. And I see myself, and they saw me as being almost like a guide when they would come to visit me, especially in Rome. And I would take them around, and I would show them, the Colosseum, and explain to them a bit of the history, or the Trevi Fountain, or wherever we would go, like the common places. And I would share the information that I had learned from doing my own walking tours and reading about it and hearing about it from the locals and all this sort of stuff. So I thought, what if I called myself the Intrepid Guide? It's how I see myself and how others also see me. And I thought that might be a nice name for a blog. So I sort of seek to do that with my audience, really. I take them along on my adventures, and, I guide them and I give them information about the place. So, yeah, I find a lot of enjoyment doing that. I love learning about places and I love sharing it. So that's pretty much it.
This is fantastic, and I must say, English is a very nice language. It's one of my favorite, and I think the word intrepid is it's a fantastic word, isn't it? And it's so suitable. And I've actually had the same experience when I was living in Hungary. When people come visit, I would play the tour guide as well.
Yeah.
So I know that feeling. So when did you start incorporating language stuff? Because obviously your main focus is on having adventures, showing the traveling side, maybe some nice photos on Instagram I've seen, very nice actually. But when did you start incorporating the language aspects and start including that? Was that from the beginning, or did that come later?
Well, I started it with the intention that it would always have both, but I didn't know to what extent. I didn't know if it was going to be like 70% travel and then 30% languages. And that's sort of like the evolution of my blog. I've sort of been I'm still deciding how much of it should be, what percentage should it be travel and languages. So I definitely started with them both in mind. And there was pretty much been balance. Sometimes it was a bit more towards the travel side, but now I'm pulling it back and it's more the language side. But it depends on what I'm doing, where I am, and what I'm learning it basically. But yeah, I think my first blog post was after the trip that I did when I went to Bruges. I came back and I wrote about Bruges. And then I thought, oh, well, that's actually interesting because, they speak Flemish Dutch there. How is that different from standard Dutch? So then I wrote a post about that. What language should you speak when you go to Bruges? And French as well. So that was sort of like an idea for another blog post. So it's sort of depending on the place that I visit, there will always be something interesting linguistically that's happening there. So yeah, I just sort of went via the destination. The destination would sort of provide me with inspiration for language-related posts. But now I make sure that I do travel phrase guides for each of the places that I visit. So because of that, I wanted to do a Dutch travel phrase guide. Then I thought, well, I've got to do one for Flemish because there are some differences there. But yeah, I've got pretty much all the places that I've visited. I've got travel phrase guides. And then if I haven't been there, I've met people through blogging, through these conferences and everything that are from different places. So I'm working on that Swedish one now, and I met Therese at TravelCon earlier this year. So I thought, I'd love to get her help to do this travel phrase guide for Swedish. And yeah, that's sort of basically how it works. I include everyone, I mention them in the post, and I'll link back to their website. And it's just sort of a nice exchange because it's sort of, when I do these travel phrase guides, I always get like a native speaker to help me with it. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about me, it's about, the community behind it and languages and connecting people and using foreign languages to connect with other people. So I think it's a nice story. It's a nice experience to sort of hear from a native speaker about their language and like, oh, I say it this way, but, standard, in the standard language, we would, you should say it this way. And then I sort of get, a bit of the tidbits, the lesser known facts that you may not get in other books or whatever.
Right.
And I try and keep them like really brief as well. So you're not like, there's not a section on how to, on pickup lines, for example. Like you'll get a travel phrase guide and they have like all these sections that I probably don't even need. Like, what are pickup lines and all this sort of thing. I just try and use have the basics, how to get around, pricing, numbers, how to introduce yourself. days of the week. And then if that is interesting to, my audience or whoever, then they might take the next step and they might want to pursue the language more seriously. But the idea with these guides is to sort of at least, get your head around the pleasantries, because that goes a long way when you're traveling. If you're showing the locals that you're trying to make an effort, you don't need to be fluent, but if you make an effort, then you're going to get a better reaction, I think, and a nicer experience there too. And it's just a sign of respect as well. So it's an education piece, I guess. So every blog post that I write about a place, I'll always link to the travel phrase guide that I've done for it.
Right, but it sounds like you're keyed into the language aspect even before you started. I would maybe say that's not usual. Most people who go traveling, especially if you're a Western tourist, maybe you might get their phrase book, and you might learn how to say hello or how much is it. That's at least what I know from my own family. But most people would focus a lot on the traveling, maybe 97% or something, and then maybe include a little bit of language as an afterthought or something.
Yeah.
Have you thought about how or why you had those thoughts already in the beginning? Is it part of the? I mean, I think it's part of the experience. Is a bit of a leading question, of course, but what did you take your own history into account, or what made you do both in a way? Because I'm sure a travel blog with no language. I mean, there are tons of those. You know those better than me.
Yeah.
So what was different from you when you decided to have, or just in the you were just there, you just had the languages already?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, blogging when it first started was basically your online journal about you, your life, your experiences, and a lot of travel bloggers started it as a way of communicating it back with their family when they were traveling the world. So when I started blogging, it was with the same mindset, like this is very much about me and my interests, and maybe trying to inspire others to have a similar interest, or to maybe focus a bit more on the language as part of your research for when you're going abroad and traveling. So I guess my first experience with that was when I went overseas for the first time, when I left Australia, and I traveled with a friend who was also from Italian heritage. Both of us, we were just in love with Italy. We wanted to go and just see, the Statue of David, and just see all the Renaissance art that we had sort of loved and admired when we were studying at uni. And during that experience, I had very limited Italian. It was basically phrasebook Italian, and I had my phrase books with me, but the problem was that I never took them with me because they were heavy, they were bulky, and in the heat of the moment, you don't have time to flick through a book. Because there's so much there,
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, if I create something, well, before I go into that, I should say that I regretted not knowing more, that I could interact more, because we were traveling a lot in the south of Italy, and, English isn't as widely spoken. And, it was unfair of me to expect them to. But I like we were saying before, I like talking to people and, having a little bit of banter, and I don't know, I felt like I could have made that trip better if I had have included the language aspect to it. So that was the trip that really sort of set the way for me wanting to learn Italian seriously. So I went back to Australia after those couple of weeks there, and I'm like, right, I'm going to do this seriously. So that's when the whole, snowball effect happened. And just before I moved to Italy, I was going to class 3 nights a week. One of those was a 1-to-1. I was going and seeing every movie at the Italian Film Festival. I was eating at Italian restaurants just so I could hear the waitresses and the pizza makers speak Italian to each other. So I guess it was just my own experience that I realized that, hey, there's something to this. And that's basically why I wanted to have language as part of the blog. And it's also something different. I'm very conscious that I don't want to be the same as other travel bloggers. I do compare myself just in terms of growth and see what they're doing, but I know that they're on a different path, and I don't want to be the same. I want to have my own niche, I guess. I mean, it's hard to define what that is exactly, and it's constantly evolving for me, at least. But I know that languages and travel it's what my passion is personally, and that if I'm focusing on what my passion is, then I can't go wrong sort of a thing. So.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good starting point for any good creative output, I feel like, what you're passionate about yourself. And then I'm sure you'll find others who are also passionate about the same things.
Yeah, everyone has got their own passion and different passions, and they sort of bring that to life in their own blogs and their own creative outlets. But yeah, languages are mine.
Yeah,
Languages and travel.
yeah, and getting to use them. And I think really, if I compare my experiences traveling, when I was much younger and I didn't really know about independent language learning, to now, I would just do so many things differently. But maybe you can share, let's say, some of your experiences, ideas about, let's say I have a trip planned to, I don't know, Indonesia in 3 months from now. I have the tickets and everything. What can I do to prepare the best? And obviously, I know I won't get fluent in the local language in 3 months, and I don't have any ambitions of doing so. But what can I do as a traveler who wants to get the most out of the little time I have before the trip?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question because there are so many different resources and they're good for different reasons, but maybe not necessarily the best. And I'm still working through that myself. So like, you've got like your language learning apps and they're adding more and more languages to these, like, Duolingo and Memrise and stuff like that. And they're really entertaining, but they don't necessarily explain all the grammar very well. So if you want to learn the language just for travel purposes, then I would definitely seek out, courses that are available. Like definitely, I know that the French Institute, they have courses specifically for people that are going to travel to France
Oh,
or
really?
French-speaking nations. I don't know how it would be for Indonesian. Again, like there's even with Norwegian now, like there's kind of limited material. When I was doing Afrikaans, it was even more limited. So it also depends on how popular that
Of
language
course.
is. But yeah, travel phrase guides are a good place to start. That's what I started with, and that's how I became more and more interested in the language. That's more from a functional perspective. Well, YouTube channels now, videos that are really helpful in terms of like getting the pronunciation and hearing from local speakers how to, introduce yourself or ask how much things are. I think YouTube is probably a really great resource, and it's free as well, which is
Yeah.
a bonus. But yeah, I think it also depends on what your focus is. How much do you want to know? What do you want to be able to say? And then spreading that across different resources. So apps, YouTube videos, if there is a school that is offering a course specifically for travelers, travel phrase guides like mine.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just focus on what's really key.
yeah,
Maybe I would probably lean towards the guides or the specific courses that are aimed at
yeah,
this,
definitely.
because then you can put them into Anki or Memrise or whatever flashcard app you want to use. I guess you can even do paper flashcards. I don't know if anyone does that anymore, but you can learn that kind of phrase book vocabulary that will make a big difference. Because I think if there's anything I enjoy about language learning is that you get a lot of results out of just a few words even. If you can
Mm,
say hi to the the pizza maker like you said before, if you can say hi to him in Italian and just ask how he is, even if you don't know anything else and you're a big question mark when he answers back, well, you just made his day like a little bit better because you took the
mm,
initiative, and because he's now happy and smiling. Well, most people anyway are very happy that you speak their language or even try to. Your
yeah.
day is suddenly better. So I think my I would say yeah, focus on what's really important and use something like flashcards. I wouldn't use like big course books like Teach Yourself or those kind of things because
No.
they're not designed for that necessarily. They might have some of the phrases. I know PIMSA, for instance, focuses a lot on like travel phrases, so maybe you can use that, but that's super expensive unless you can find it in your local library. But yeah, using something quick and fun like a 15, 20 minutes a day, or I didn't even know there was courses specifically for travelers. That's pretty amazing actually. So
Well, I mean,
if
the
you have
French are
those.
pretty good. The French are pretty good with sort of promoting their language. They're very proud.
Mm.
They have really good exchanges as well with students, international schools and such. But yeah, at least here in London, they offer courses around, learning French for travel, and even hobby-based courses as well. So if you want to learn more about French cooking, you could learn French through doing cooking classes. So
How
like it's
amazing.
really good, and I feel like the I don't know what you would call it, like the institute of whatever for each country should do more to promote their own languages. I feel like we take the brunt of it as people in the language community to encourage others to do it, but really, like the French have got it. I think they're doing a really great job, like to protect and promote their language.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, maybe they know that nobody speaks English in some parts of France, so that you need it, otherwise you won't eat. I don't know if
Uh,
that's true. But what are some of the things that you've learned about traveling, and we can get to language learning in a second. What are some of the things that have maybe not changed the way you travel, but what are some aha moments about traveling that you've used to sort of enhance your travels, or as you've done more and more and you've written about it, I guess that when you reflect on what you do, you always thinking about what could be done differently or with different ways. Are there anything that comes to mind in terms of that people could maybe use for their travels? Because obviously a lot of people like to travel, and when you get that chance to go somewhere, it's usually not for a very long time, and you probably
mm.
can't go back quickly after for most people. So how do people maximize? Do you have any tips and tricks that you've gained over the last years?
Well, I think there are different types of travelers. There are people like me that I just want to see as much as possible in the time that I'm there. It doesn't matter how long I'm in a place. I want to try and jam in as much as I
Okay.
can. I just want to see everything, but that's not for everyone. And it also depends on what sort of trip you want to have. Do you want to have that trip where you see everything, or do you want to have a more of a relaxation trip? But I definitely feel like it's one of the nice things to do is if you're in a place to maybe go back to the same restaurant a couple of times, because the waiters and the people that work there, they will recognize you. And I think if they speak a different language, then it sort of opens you up to have a conversation with them. They become more interested in you because they have seen you a couple of times. They'll be more inquisitive to find out your story, where you're from. Um, but yeah, I feel like that's nice. It's definitely something that you would do in Italy, I feel. If you're staying in Italy, you go back to the same cafe every day, to the same bar, I should say, which is where they sell coffee. And they will recognize you, and they'll be a bit more inquisitive, and they'll recognize you, and they'll smile like, oh, you're here again. And I don't know, I think I've learned lots of these things from Italy, but again, I don't know if that's the same everywhere. But if you want that connection with people, I think that's one way that you could do it, especially like instead of having like breakfast at your hotel, but yeah, to go out,
Mm.
get a recommendation from the hotel by any means or wherever you're staying, but maybe go to that place a few times while you're there. And it's a nice way to meet the locals, and then any recommendations that they have and any sort of, conversations that you have that you never know where they're going to lead. You never know. Like you could have some crazy distant connection with someone back in your home country. Um, it's a small world at times.
Oh
If
yeah.
you ask around and you talk about certain things and you find out that they know so and so who used to be your neighbor, or I don't know, like anything is possible really. So I think that's nice. I think it's a nice way to get to know a place a bit better, by having those, yeah, your usual hangouts. I mean, you might be only there for a couple of days, but if you maybe go back to the same place a couple of times, it can become your local while you're there. You can feel a bit more like a local.
Yeah. I think that's a great tip. Just adding my opinion as well. Like, you should really never buy hotel packages that has all the meals included, just because it's first of all, hotel food is, I would say, on average, from my experience, it's just not very good. It's just,
No,
I
it's
think
not
it's,
worth the €20 that they make
yeah,
you pay.
exactly. I think in general, it's like just good enough not to be completely terrible. It's just
Mm.
edible, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to in London. I was with staying at a hotel with my mom, and we went to the what's it called, the green one, Express something, Holiday Inn. Yeah, Holiday Inn. It wasn't the Express version, so it was like the slightly fancier, and that hotel buffet was great. But obviously we had lots of plans during the week, so we didn't eat there every morning. We went to some of the
Mm.
other places as well. And I think that's a really good tip. Like, don't buy because I know a lot of people, when they look at trips to, let's say, warm countries in the winter, they look at Turkey or Italy or Spain even, and they look at all these big resorts with like all inclusive. And I just think it's a shame to miss that opportunity to go out and explore local places for breakfast or dinner or lunch or whatever. And the thing is, the hotel restaurant is still going to be there. So if you don't get out or you can't be asked to go out one day, you can just probably buy it for that one time. Bill it to your room or whatever. So just use any opportunity to get out. I think is a great tip that
Yeah.
a lot of people sadly don't do because they're like, oh, all inclusive, I can eat all I want.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like the more and more that I'm looking at accommodation now, the less often I'm seeing that breakfast is included. So it's a good excuse
That's a
to
good thing.
force yourself in to go out instead of paying the extra up front for it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just go out somewhere.
Yeah,
Um,
the Holiday Inn breakfast was £14 a person.
yeah,
What can you get for £14 in a cafe? Quite a lot.
yeah.
So it's definitely worth considering.
Mm.
We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. When I started learning Russian 4 or 5 years ago, I couldn't really say much, even though I'd learned quite a big vocabulary. I had spent a lot of time on books and flashcards and apps because I didn't really know what else to do. I thought that language evening classes were quite inconvenient and they were quite expensive as well. And I didn't really have anyone to talk to in my little town in Denmark. So I was really lacking speaking practice. I don't know why I hesitated for so long to get on board the tutoring wagon, as it were, and start to get regular online tutoring, because obviously the internet has enabled a connectivity that we've never had before. So when I started to have tutoring lessons in Russian, everything changed. Like I improved so quickly, and I went from not being able to say a full sentence probably to actually having 1 hour long conversations with my tutor. Okay, they were very basic conversations. They're very, she was very patient and it was very slow, but it all took place on italki because they have the biggest selection of tutors. They have great offers where you can, like for instance, now if you go and have a lesson, if you use my link actualfluency.com/italki, you get a $10 free credit, and you can get many tutoring lessons there for less than $10 an hour. So you're essentially just getting a free lesson. The other part is just it's so convenient. You go in, you use the calendar on the side to pick a time that's good for your time zone, and it shows when your teacher is available. And then italki just does the rest. It sends out the reminders for you, and it takes care of the payment as well, so you don't get scammed by some, questionable teachers out there on the internet. I had a lot of tutoring lessons, and if any one of you have tried learning Russian, you know that you definitely need it. But it wasn't until way later that I realized just how powerful these tutoring lessons were. And now I totally 100% recommend it. Like if you can't do any other work in a language, if you find textbooks boring, or if you find any other method like not your cup of tea, there's nothing that beats the speed of which you learn from a personal one-on-one tutor, and you can find thousands of them on italki. That's italki. And like I said, you can get a free $10 credit if you use my link, actualfluency.com/italki. And now let's get back to the episode.
In terms of the language, though, this is just something that I do, but you may not want to do, or your listeners may not want to do, depending on how confident they are. I tend to linger a little bit longer when I go through immigration when I land at a place. So, you know how, like, the immigration officers are pretty, they don't smile, they're not happy, like they're having a crap day. So then I rock up, give them my passport, and I will try and say, hello or how are you? And then I'll say, is that how you pronounce it? And they're like, oh, no, we say it this way. And I'm like, oh, okay, because I thought it was this. And no, we say this. But if you're from this region, then we would say it this way. But we're here, so we say it this way, and yada, yada. So obviously that changes the whole dynamic, and they sort of smile and they just, stamp my passport and send me on my way. So it's a very short interaction, but it's a bit of fun that sort of, obviously puts them in a better mood and changes their perspective a little bit, maybe brightens their day, but it also, it helps me because I know, okay, this is how I should pronounce it, but they also say this. So I've obviously learnt something at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that trend will basically follow me throughout my entire trip. So if I need to get a taxi or if I'm buying a train ticket or whatever, I will aim to say it in the language, and then I'll ask for feedback if I've said it correctly. So
Right.
that's just something that I do because it corrects me, because I may have seen the phonetic pronunciation somewhere or I've watched it on YouTube, but I'm still not pronouncing it correctly. And I will just ask on the ground, am I right or am I wrong, and correct me. And then if they've given me a whole bunch of other phrases, oh, can you write that down? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. And they'll grab a pencil and, they'll write it down and then they'll give it to me. But that's just something that I like to do, but it may not be for everyone.
Yeah, I guess if you have a very extroverted personality, you can do that with any contact along the way, whether it's the hotel check-in or the restaurant, just use every opportunity, even if it's just a hello or a thank you. I did that in Hungary as well a lot. I would say something, and I think also learning the phrase "how do you say" is very good.
Yes.
That's my favorite phrase actually.
Yeah.
Or what does that mean in the language?
Yeah.
Instead of switching entirely to English. I think those are two of my favorite phrases, and I would ask them all the time with the wait staff, and they would just get really happy, and they would find it very funny that this Danish guy was trying to pronounce, the Hungarian. It's like, no, we don't say it like that, and you say it like this, and because you can get very creative with those languages, the what do you call them, the agglutinative languages. You can be very flexible with how you say things, and there's typically only one right way, but if you say it wrong, they will understand it and give a little laugh and say, yeah, I know what you mean, but
yeah.
But
that's part of it, right? It's good to make those mistakes because all of a sudden you become more endearing and they're like, oh, isn't he cute?
Yeah. It's really funny.
Nice.
I mean, you can't have a lot of personal pride, I feel like, because you are basically an idiot in the language. So if you try to take it too seriously and think that you're gonna sound like a native speaker after reading a couple of sentences in a phrasebook, then you're gonna be set up for disappointment. But if you go in and say, okay, I'm just gonna come in guns blazing, I'm gonna say what I think I can say, and if the people behind the counter starts laughing at me, I'll laugh with them, because that's part of the experience.
Yes.
I had a great experience in Hungary. I was a little bit outside the city center, and I was trying to make a sandwich, and it was like one of those, make your own sandwich. It's like, okay, ordering a sandwich in itself is pretty easy, but saying I would like cheese, onion, ham, and mayonnaise, and the girls would just say, would you like blah? I didn't know what that meant, and I was like, can you point? So he started pointing at each thing. Like, you want this, and it was just, everyone was just really happy, and I was just sort of laughing. And that was the hardest thing I ever did in a foreign language, I think, making my own sandwich. But as I sat down, I was just like, yeah, that was amazing. And obviously their day is much, much better now because it's not just, angry people coming in and swearing at them. It's actually a difference, it's a different kind of world. And I came to the same restaurant, like they had a lunch offer every day. So I came almost every lunch to this place. And after a while, they just kind of know you, and I think that's also funny because you can build that relationship like you talked about.
Yeah.
And I don't know what my reputation was around that place if I wasn't there, but there'd be like the foreigner, I guess, or something like that. That could be the name, the code name. But it shows, and I didn't know much in Hungarian. I'll be honest, I didn't know much at all. I hadn't studied that much, but the experiences were just amazing. The rewards are great, I feel like, and that's getting more out of language learning in traveling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I do this even after a long haul flight. If I'm going somewhere, it doesn't matter how tired I am. I will still make an effort when I hit the ground, and I go through immigration. I just sort of, because if I'm in a crappy mood, it's one thing I know will help me snap out of it, because there's going to be some sort of funny exchange that's going to happen as soon as I say, is that how you say it? And I'll giggle or something. It's just, I think it's a good remedy for being in a grumpy mood.
It's wonderful. Like if you can make fun of your own inabilities in a language, I think you've reached a good place.
Yeah.
Personally, definitely. So, what do you think about this? I don't know if it's a controversy or like a drama. I don't know I don't follow many language bloggers at all, but there's been a move, I think, to do all this like non-guidebook experiences. And if you go to Rome, for instance, everyone is talking about the Colosseum and the typical sites. But there's also people who are like, yeah, you should explore the unknown or the paths less trodden or whatever. And you have what's that guidebook called? I forgot the global one that has like,
Lonely Planet?
yeah, that's the one exactly. And
Yeah.
I saw a funny cartoon from Itchy Feet where it was called something like Lonely Planet, Undiscovered Secrets or something. But because everyone had the guide, there was like a massive group of people there. So just want
Oh.
your thoughts on that because personally, I think when I go to a new place, I think my first objective is to see the standard sites, to see what are they famous for, because
Yeah.
then I can build my own opinions of that. I think it's a little bit arrogant to say, "Oh yeah, when I go to Rome, I'm not going to see the Colosseum because there's so many undiscovered treasures of Italy or whatever." Do you know what I'm trying to get at here? It's
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it depends on which angle you come at this. So, yeah, I mean, if it's your first, let's use Italy or Rome for an example. If it's your first trip to Rome, of course you want to go to the Vatican, the Colosseum, and that's totally normal. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then it can also leave you feeling disappointed because there's so many people that go to these places. I hear people like that they don't like. It breaks my heart when people say, "Oh, I didn't like Rome. I prefer Florence or Venice or whatever." That breaks my heart. Like Rome is my second home through and through after Australia, and I'm like, well, yeah. First of all, how long did you stay there? Where did you go? Where did you eat? Like, oh, I didn't like the pizza in Rome, or I didn't like the gelato in Rome. I'm like, yeah, but where did you go? Um, like it's first time
But how do you know if
visitors.
you're going there first time? What's the most reliable source? Is it the Lonely Planet or is it the travel blogs like the Intrepid Guide or
Yeah, I
how do
mean,
you
you
build
can't
that?
really, yeah, you can't really go wrong when you're getting recommendations of where to go for the first time because you'll have your own idea of what you want to see. That's the reason why you're going there usually. You're going there because there are certain things that you want to see. And then I think it is nice to weave in a few of the places that are less spoken about. So different churches that have like a really interesting history that aren't exactly on the tourist track. Um, and I feel like if you're going back there for the second time, that's when you want to see the places that no one has really heard of. And that's where these books come in handy. But, like travel bloggers and these travel guides, the onus is sort of, maybe they're over promoting a place where they have like over tourism and these places don't have the same charm as what they used to. Um,
Hmm.
so it's there are positives and negatives that I can both see. It's like, okay, get people out of the Colosseum and show them what the rest of Rome is about.
Yeah,
Like there's just so much else happening in Rome other than the Colosseum and the Vatican and the Trevi Fountain and the Pantheon.
but
I
it's a
mean,
balance always, of course.
exactly. But I'm conscious that it's going to make all these other places that are less touristy more touristy and take away the charm of those
Yeah,
undiscovered places.
of course, yeah. Like if you have a
So,
little town or something that's beautiful and serene and there's like the family restaurant, if
yeah.
everyone starts coming there, you're gonna have the McDonald's and the Starbucks and it's just another tourist place.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny that way because it's kind of selfish to say I'd like it. I like it, but if a lot of people like it, then I won't like it.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but
Well, I
it's
know,
interesting.
but yeah, it is interesting because it's not just the tourists that are there, but it's also like how that works in terms of supporting the tourism there. Like how like these people obviously have to stay somewhere. So if I use like Spain as an example, I was in the Costa Brava region of Spain, which is the north eastern corner of Spain. We were I can't remember the exact name of the town, but basically they were pretty upset. with Airbnb sort of taking over the city, and that locals basically didn't have a place to stay, and it was just all the tourists living in these Airbnbs. So you have to think about it from that perspective. If the town is so small that it causes influx of tourism, and the locals who live there all year round don't have anywhere to live, or the prices are inflated for accommodation so much that they can't afford to live there anymore, then that's like another issue. So
Yeah, but what can be done about that? Because you see that happening a lot now you see it in London, you see it in Budapest,
yeah,
Madrid. Like it's happening. Or Paris, I've heard as well, is horrible for rent. But at the same time, it's hard to do things against, because if you own something like a house, it should be your prerogative to rent it out. And if people want to pay a lot of money for that privilege, raising the prices of everything, then, in terms of economics at least, that is just that's just market economics. But then I guess I have a bit of a double standard here, because I'd like to rent the cheap Airbnbs in city centers, but I also want cheap rent if I want to live in London or somewhere
yeah,
else. But I don't know what the answer could be to that. I kind of like what Berlin is doing. They have rent caps, like the landlords can't raise the rent more than inflation every year or whatever the fixed percentage is. So
yeah, that's smart.
there's no Wild West there. But then the problem is that when people come as foreigners, they are usually subletting anyway. So that price might be different anyway, and can't be governed by the community. And then in New York, they're making it illegal to do Airbnbs from certain buildings and stuff. And obviously, there's a lot of Wild West going on there, similar to how Uber is changing the taxi world as well. But I don't know what the solution is to that. I do like Airbnb myself, really preferred in many cases over hotels, just because having your own place is so much better than just a little room somewhere, I feel like, and cheaper in many cases.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is either. I know that some places will charge like a tourist tax, just like some hotels do. So maybe, it's a case of that these Airbnbs charge that extra tourist tax that then goes back into the economy, I guess. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah,
It's a tricky one.
it's a very philosophical debate, because you can also
Yeah.
say, is tourism inherently good or bad? Because if you have, let's say, Budapest, which I still think it's a bit of a hidden gem for many Western tourists, because a lot of people think it's Eastern Europe, oh, there's a lot of crime and it's not very modern. But when you get there, it's like, oh my God, this city's amazing. It's got so much going for it, rich, rich, rich food life and nightlife and all sorts of cultural events and things happening, and lovely weather in the summer as well. You don't have a beach or any kind of that kind of opportunity, unfortunately. You have the river, which I probably wouldn't recommend bathing in, but that's the one thing holding it back, I guess. But then you see people working there; they're paid, 600 euros a month for a full-time job, and
Wow.
and you go there. So in a sense, a tourist in Budapest is contributing to the problem, but also solving the problem, because if there weren't any tourists in Budapest, how many people would be unemployed, for instance? That would be a massive problem. So it's a massive issue that I am not even sure how to even begin to fix, because obviously tourists are both stimulating the economy, but they're also breaking it in a way by buying like holiday flats or even just renting on Airbnb, because it's better for the landlords to earn 40 euros a day rather than 300 euros a month renting out their Budapest apartments. So yeah, I don't know. I guess the takeaway is to just be, in general, just be respectful and be generous, I would say, as well. Like if you get a good service, throw in a good tip if the culture allows it, of course.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation. But that kind of goes without saying. You should be respectful when you're abroad.
Yeah, this one has got me thinking now. While we're sitting here, while I'm listening to you, I'm trying to think of a solution. This is
Yeah,
generally what I
hard.
try to do. Because I'm just like, I've got some pictures here that I'm looking at of Norway. Norway's my next trip. I've been there a couple of times now, but a friend of mine, again from the blogging world, she is from a a small village right near another village called Flom, outside of Bergen. And Flom is famous for having the most scenic train ride in the world. So they get hundreds of thousands, if not maybe just over 1 million or something. I'm not exactly sure, but like way more tourists than there are locals that live in this tiny village.
Right.
The cruise ships come through the fjord and drop all these tourists to go on this train ride. But they don't usually stay in Flom. They're there for a day, you know, with the cruise ship. They'll come and go. But I'm just thinking how, like, and her house overlooks the fjord and she sees the cruise ships go in and out. Like, I don't know how I would feel as a local seeing that offload of all these tourists and how they feel. Like, it's not.
I can't imagine
nice
it being
feeling.
nice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's affected her. I don't think it has. I think she just thinks it's funny. But I don't know. I would feel almost.
I'm not gonna disrespect people who go on cruises, but I think they are the worst travelers in the world.
Well,
It's just, if you read, there was lately a report by some of the Caribbean islands, I think it was Barbados or something, where a lot of these long cruises go to. And for a long time, the islands or the cities paid the cruise companies to go to their islands so people would spend money.
yeah,
But it turns out, like in a recent, I don't know if it was a report or just the news, but they said that they're not going to do it anymore because people don't spend anything there. And that might have been Norway as well, actually. They might have given an example of Norway where they paid, it might even be the same town, who knows, but there was some example of where the city was paying the cruise companies quite a lot to dock there, but it turns out the average spend for each tourist was tiny. It was like less than £20. So it wasn't even worth it for the city, because they obviously have to spend a lot of money on actually cleaning up and like managing this connection and the paying for it in the first place.
yeah,
And I think that, I don't like the whole cruise idea. I like the idea of being on a ship disconnected from everywhere for a little while. I think that's how I would write a book. Just being completely disconnected, just on the seas. That would be nice. But a lot of these cruises is just like kind of I don't even know what to call it. It's like an all-inclusive experience, but you see, it's so shallow in a way because you spend most of the time on a ship that has nothing. It's just a restaurant and some entertainment, and you're spending a lot of time doing nothing. It seems you're waiting to do something, and then you finally get to an interesting place like a port, and you're told, well, you have 4 hours to see the city. Well, okay. What are you going to see in 4 hours? You also need to eat and stuff, and you just come in like such huge numbers that if I was living in that little Norwegian town, I would probably move because that must be so annoying. Like 700 people docking off and just filling up the town square, Must be horrible in a way.
yeah. I mean, I'm personally not a fan of doing a cruise. I don't like the idea of being locked on a boat with other people that I don't know.
Yeah.
Even though I'm extroverted, but from an environmentally friendly perspective, I'm not really too crash hot on it either. If I'm going to be on a boat, I'd rather be on, I don't know, something where its emphasis is on where you stop as opposed to the onboard entertainment, like these theatrical shows and swimming pools and casinos and whatever else. I would rather just prefer that the ship is a means of getting me from one place to the next.
Yeah.
As opposed to,
Not even sure that even exists anymore. It probably doesn't. Probably too expensive.
I don't know.
You don't get transport ships or like passenger ships anymore, do you? It's only cruises that take you on a long distance. I mean, you can take a ferry, that across the channel or something.
Yeah.
But I actually don't know if they still have like Titanic-like cruises or a passenger ship that just goes from somewhere really far away.
Yeah, I feel like
That could be nice.
Yeah, I feel like there are ones. I don't want to get the names mixed up. Like Intrepid Travel, they definitely have ones where they sort of take you down to Antarctica on a boat. There are other ones that take you along the coast of Norway.
But
again, I don't know what
much more of a cruise, isn't it?
Well, I don't think that their focus is on having like onboard entertainment.
Okay.
I think it's very much they need to transport goods and you go along for the ride almost. And you have the
Yeah.
option to get off and stay in that place and then get picked up on the way back, for example. Um, I think there'd be something. I just don't know too much about it.
Right. Well, it was just a spare thought anyway. I wasn't looking for to sign up to any
Oh,
boating
why not?
journeys, and but like I said, I'd love that, or maybe a cabin, not a cabin. What do you call it? Like a cabin in the woods or
Yeah,
something, like
yeah.
Thoreau or something. Um, but what was it? I was thinking about that. Oh yeah, the conferences, of course. I just wanted to throw that in there as well, since that's where we met last year in October in Reykjavik, or near Reykjavik anyway.
Yeah.
And so, are you planning to go on any other language conferences next year, 2019? And if so, why?
Well, I would really like to go to the one in Japan, Fukuoka, I think it's how you pronounce it.
Hmm.
The only issue I have there is that I will need to take, significant time off work to make the most out of that trip. Like, it's not like I can do that over a weekend like I did with Slovenia this year.
Right.
And as I said, my year of for annual leave is sort of already taken up already. So while I would have loved to have gone, I don't think I will be able to. Bratislava, the polyglot gathering, which I haven't been to, but I hear great things about, that goes over 4 days, I believe. That's more manageable, so maybe that's something that I can squeeze in, hopefully. If it's, over a weekend, then I can just take 2 days off work. It makes it a bit easier.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, other than that, there is also the Language Influencer Summit, which is a new one that's happening in Berlin. I've got tickets to that, so I'll be there. Um, and yeah, apart from that, I haven't really got anything else on my radar in terms of language meetups and conferences.
But that's pretty good. That's I mean, if you can get, for me, the Japan one would be nice, but it all depends on what kind of tickets will be available on the flights. If I'm going to be paying £700 return, probably will be a little bit less, but I don't think they have tickets yet. But if I can find a good deal, I would love to go. I've never been to Asia before, even, so that's
Yeah.
kind of a big place of the world I haven't even started to explore. But yeah, highly recommend Bratislava. I think it's one of the most informal conferences of there is, and I've had the best experiences at those because having it extra days means that you can do other things as well, and you won't feel so guilty by, let's say, skipping some of the things, or maybe even taking half a day to do something else, or just going with your friends for lunch for hours. You won't worry about it because there's 4 days of events, and obviously if you come a day before and leave a day earlier, you've got a lot of days to like plan it. So for me, it's probably the best event. Generally, I don't really watch too many talks. I just watch them online at some point if I find any interesting ones. But for gathering in terms of the social aspect, I think that's the best one. Also, the common food. I think meeting over the lunch and dinner is a fantastic way to meet new
Yeah.
people.
Well, that's definitely what draws me to it, is like I've heard the exact same sort of feedback from other people that have gone, that they go there for the social aspect.
Yeah,
And to be honest, I don't have much of a social life because I'm working two jobs, my blog and my day job. So I use this as an excuse to go offline, I guess, and just, focus on my relationships, my friendships and all of that.
well, me too,
Um,
definitely.
yeah,
Because
it's
I
a
don't
good
know.
excuse to force yourself to go and be social. Because
Yeah,
otherwise I probably wouldn't do it, even though I'm a very sociable person. But, if I know I have to do something, I will prioritize that. So,
yeah, and there's a direct flight as well from London, which obviously helps.
oh,
Uh,
ace. Well, then, yeah,
but
sweet.
it is Ryanair, so I guess that's a kind of a, what do you call it when something is good and bad, but
Well, as long as they get me there on time and I get back home on time, I don't care.
plus or minus, I think you'll get there definitely, but it might be they might drop you off in a different airport or something. That happens, but they're very close there. Budapest, Prague, Bratislava, and Vienna. They're all within a couple of hours, so it's not a big problem. But
Mm.
it could be great to go to those events. Thank you for taking your time today. I know we've run a little bit over the normal runtime, but it's been a lot of interesting topics, and it's always a pleasure. to talk to you. And
Yeah, amazing.
if people want to find out more, do you have just the best place to get in touch? Maybe they have questions or any resources you want to plug?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me. It's been nice to chat. It's been 2 hours. It's been really cool. Yeah, well, if anyone would like to follow my adventures or my blog, I am Intrepid Guide on all social media. So Twitter, Instagram, um, what's the other one? Facebook is the Intrepid Guide. Um, yeah, on YouTube, I'm the Intrepid Guide. So the other social handles, I couldn't have that; it was too long. But yeah, then there's my blog, which is theintrepidguide.com. But yeah, you can DM me on any of those social media platforms, and I will respond. Instagram is probably the easiest one, just because Facebook doesn't always throw up a message; it sort of goes to the other inbox.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, if you contact me or send me a tweet or whatever, I will happily respond.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, until we meet again, hopefully in Bratislava or maybe even Japan afterwards, that would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
that would be great. Yeah, thank you so
Cool.
much.
Well, thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. I really appreciate having you here today. Just before you leave, I just want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is italki. Italki is a tutoring platform where you can find affordable tutors for every language in the world, pretty much. So get started today and get a free $10 credit when you book your first lesson. If you go to actualfluency.com/italki, and that's spelled Italki.